we have asked Mr. Godi, the former chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, to speak to us about this. Mr. Godi, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So perhaps let's just start with your criticism. Does it relate to this specific incident, the leaked audio and the issues around it, or is there a wider view when you talk about the lack of holding the president accountable by ANC members of SCOPA?
Well, thank you for having me. I must say that I have avoided so-called ruling from the grave, that is nitpicking on the work of the committee. I've really tried to focus a little bit away from it. So my observation is not a generic one, it's a very pointed one in relation to this specific case of the leaked audio tape, that I believe that SCOPA could have done more, should have done more. I'm sure you will recall that there was a legal opinion from Parliament which actually confirmed that it was within SCOPA's rights to pursue the matter and hold the president to account for it.
I asked that, and perhaps you will expand a little further on it, because you do go into matters of state capture and the Zondo Commission report, in the report that has had you be critical. But let's just focus first on a SCOPA process and procedure, which you say that you've really exercised restraint on, punching holes in the work that it's been doing with regards to this matter. So SCOPA did at some point, we understand, entertain looking into the matter, but the intention to investigate was quashed. Share with me what ordinarily would have happened, what process would have happened, and even if you could perhaps share from your own experience so that we understand why you are critical.
I think the first two steps were done very correctly, which was firstly to seek a legal opinion from Parliament, because there was no precedent to a case like this one, where the issue does not arise from a report of the Auditor General, but rather from some private meetings, but which spoke to the use of public funds for which SCOPA is responsible. So that was the one part. The second part was for the committee to then seek to decide, to actually agree that fine, we're going to hold the president to account. How do we do that? They first said, well, let's write to the president, which was not wrong. It's a normal practice to write to anybody, and based on their submission to then decide whether you want to call them in or the submission is sufficient. Now, the president responded, and based on his responses, that's where you could see the political divide within the committee, wherein the ANC members all said, no, let's not call the president. His response is somewhat believable. Let's wait for the Zondo report. We'll then decide whether to call him or not. Whereas some of the members were saying, no, based on his response, let's call him. Let's not wait for Zondo, because the issue of the audio tape, I think, had not arisen in the context of the Zondo Commission. Now, my own experience when I came in as chairperson, the first thing that I really worked hard to do was to try and ensure that as members, we work as a team. We try and jettison partisan political perspectives, which played themselves out in this particular instance. Whether I could have managed if I was chairperson or not, I don't know. But however, what I do know is that during my tenure, especially the last term, we were united as a committee and always acted as a team I can just give an example. When we're dealing with SASSA, moving SASSA to the post office, you will recall that there were lots of glitches from the Department of Social Development. And we then decided that, no, there is a cabinet subcommittee on social security chaired by the then President Jacob Zuma. I wrote to him, I think on a Tuesday, that the following Tuesday, we want him in his capacity as the chairperson of that committee to appear before SCOPA and explain to us what the challenges were. And I think for me, the fundamental point to be noted there is that the ANC members in the committee did not fret. They did not oppose it. However, what happened is something else, which is that the cabinet then changed the chairpersonship and appointed Jeff Hadebe, who actually came. And it was the coming of the subcommittee cabinet that actually unlocked and blocked all the problems we had, and there was movement until SASSA was moved to the
So
post
what
office.
governs, what
my
governs
expectation,
the interface between SCOPA, some of the portfolio committees, and also if you could just help us understand the distinction between the office of the president as head of the executive and the office of the ANC president, because one wants to understand, would there have been a different lens through which this whole matter would have been seen?
well, I think that's an interesting dynamic you are raising. But let me start by saying that, look, SCOPA, like all committees of parliament, are empowered by legislation to call anybody to appear before them and to present documentation. Anybody. They can call anybody, even you, if there is anything that they believe you can assist the committee with, without you working in a government department or being in management at the SABC. They have a right to call you, and if you don't come, they can summons you. And if you refuse to come, that will be contempt. So first thing, it's SCOPA has a right to call anybody and everybody. But the dynamic that you have thrown in around the president of the majority party versus the head of state, it's a substantive distinction, except that if there is anything of material interest to any committee of parliament, it can call the president of the ANC, it can call Josh Kwambane in Guyana, it can call anybody. And in this particular instance, the leader of the ANC spoke about his knowledge of the public funds that are being diverted for ANC internal political purposes. And the question of interest to SCOPA is, when the Auditor General reports about irregular expenditure, about fruitless and wasteful expenditure, which of it is actually diverted to ANC and which of it is diverted into private pockets of crooked individuals, so that they can be able, based on what information he was going to give, to say, fine, in the Department of Housing, there was this tender of 5 million. It is part of the money that went to the ANC. Let's follow up. And therefore, to be able to protect the public funds, or actually to be able to follow up on those officials who would have been used to divert those resources.
I suppose for a lot of us who are trying to understand this process and procedure, particularly when it has to do with transparency, effective management of the public purse. I mean, the whole issue of the Zondo Commission came into play. Even you yourself were critical of ANC members wanting to wait until the final Zondo Commission report is released, saying it rendered the processes of SCOPA ineffective. Now, there was a whole lot of discussion around whom the president is appearing as when he appears before the Zondo Commission. And you have even said that you felt that a lot of what he revealed and said that he's been spared from the process in terms of the report. So would it have made a difference when the president agreed to appear before SCOPA? Would a subpoena have been a more efficient way of handling the transparency of information?
Well, look, the general practice in South Africa is that officials are merely invited, and they, by and large, comply. If you look at the American system, whenever you're called to appear before their parliament, you are subpoenaed, you are summoned. That's why there is oath-taking, meaning binding you to speak the truth and all that. So in this instance, firstly, the president issued a statement that he's prepared to cooperate with SCOPA, which was good and very encouraging. And secondly, on that day, the chairperson of SCOPA said that the South Africans, the State Security Agency, had actually wanted to give him documentation, but he had said to them, wait until after the meeting where we're going to decide what to do. So I don't think, well, so far it does not appear as if there were problems around cooperation, but it is just that the committee itself then took another decision, which might have been informed, as you rightly point out, my presentation at the Zondo Commission was to say, let's disabuse ourselves of looking at oversight as an administrative process. It's a political process, because members of parliamentary committees go there with mandates from their political parties that they cannot overrule. So if members of the ANC were told by their chief whip that when you go there, the president is not called, there was nothing else they were going to do. And irrespective of whatever arguments that might have been brought in, they were not going to change. So the problem and the issue here is political consideration when doing oversight and when wanting accountability.
All right, thank you so much for your time. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Would have liked to ask you more questions, but thank you for speaking to us, Themba Godi, who is a former SCOPA chair.